Hey guys, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. This is Lexi Eve here, and this is the magical number 11 in Thelema. I want to talk about this. It's a really cool topic, and a lot of people notice the footnotes in Liber 58 Gematria, and often comment that they seem contradictory, and besides for that, there's mention of the number 11 in the Book of the Law and elsewhere. So I'm just going to go and dive into this. So let's get into it. Nuit and Hadid tell us their numbers are 11. In Liber L, chapter 1, verse 60, Nuit says, "My number is 11, as all their numbers who are of us, the five-pointed star with a circle in the middle, and the circle is red. My color is black to the blind, but the blue and gold are seen of the seeing." In Liber L, chapter 2, verse 16, Hadid says, "I am the Empress and the Hierophant, thus 11, as my bride is 11. If we look at Appendix 32 of Crowley's Commentary of L, we delve a portion of the mystery of the importance of the number 11. Quote, "I am the Empress and the Hierophant, Vav, is Atu's 3 and Atu's 5, which equal 8. And Atu 8 is actually 11, both because of the 11 letters in Abrahadabra, which equals 418. 418 is Heth spelled in full. Heth also equals 8. The key word of all this ritual, and because 8, Atu 8, is not Leo's strength, but Libra justice in the tarot." End quote. So, I will come back to this later on, and I'll reiterate so that I remind you of the importance of this statement. Now, in Liber 58 Gematria, Part 1, The Universe as It Is. In Section 1, Crowley writes about the number 11, quote, "The hen decad, which is an 11-pointed star, the hen decad, the accursed shells, that only exist without the divine tree, 1 and 1 equal 2, in its evil sense of not being one." End quote. Basically, in this sense, 11 is not only a deviation from perfect union, but also blasphemies the decad, the number 10, by surpassing it, and also equates itself to duality in its post-Arabic appearance that we use today in the appearance of the number 11, which is 2 ones. Note that the sigil of the Sabbatic goat contains the names Lilith, Samael, and Leviathan. In my opinion, this is meant to indicate that by the practice of magic, one will gain the means to overcome and master their lowest self. I do not take it to mean that one should invoke such entities. Personally, I would only use a circle and triangle to deal with their like, and have always recommended the same to others. I myself have done otherwise, and thankfully had little to no results in those experiments. I'm going to come back to the Sabbatic goat in a second. Now, the contradictory statement in Liber 58, further down in Part 2, The Universe as We Make It, on the number 11, Crowley writes, "The great magical number, as uniting the antithesis of 5 and 6, etc., odd, AUD, the magic force itself." End quote. Here, 5 and 6, which make up 11, are symbolic of man uniting with the cosmos via the pentagram and hexagram. It is the same as the symbols of the circle and square, a lower form of the Tao Day, light and dark, etc., etc. Basically, a necessary step back towards the divine is 5 plus 6 equals 11, now that Nuit has divided herself for love's sake for the chance of union. You see, when it comes to Kabbalah, or it comes to Gematria, what you're trying to do is really analyze stuff. So, for instance, with the number 11, besides for 6 and 5, you could also add 8 and 3, or 9 and 2, right? 7 and 4. So you want to look at the components of the number 11 in that sense. I'm not going to break down each of these, but for instance, with Hermetic occultism, the primary numbers from 1 through 10 correspond with the Sephiroth. And so if you know what those 10 Sephiroth generally are in terms of their energy and correspondences, for instance, 8 is Mercury. So you could think of all things mercurial and meditate on how 8, in conjunction with 3, which represents the Trinity, especially of the supernal, think about how those two numbers come together to create the number 11, right? And that goes for any number that you could break down its parts. When it comes to Kabbalah in general, one thing you're trying to do is work towards being able to connect any part of the tree of life with any other part of the tree of life through whatever means necessary, such as how I'll later on do with the word Abrahadabra by looking at its basic structure from Abrahadabra equal 418, how 418 is Chet spelled in full, how Chet is by its Hebrew numerical value 8. 8 is Mercury, right? So it indicates all of these various things, and as said before, 8, for instance, is the 8th card, which has been switched with the 11th card. So 8 now becomes 11, and 11 becomes 8. So you could generally meditate on how you take any one thing and connect it to any other thing on the tree of life through the paths and through various correspondences. Essentially, this process is talking about the cluster fucking oneself. 6 divided by 5 equals 1.20. In this equation, 1 is Nuit, infinite space. The point is Hadid, any center in space or individual perspective. The 2 represents Horus, their offspring. 0 is the progression of the great work, which is reduction from 2 to 0. The point in union with its opposite. Now, in Hebrew, the word Aud, A-U-D, equals 11 by Gematria. Its letters are Aleph, the Fool, Vav, the Hierophant, and Daleth, the Empress, thus Horparkrat, Hadid, and Nuit, respectively. Aud literally translates to fire stick or ember, indicating the astral light and prana. I'd liken it to the element of spirit in Malkuth for simplicity. Bear in mind that Liber 58 Gematria is of course work taken directly from the Golden Dawn and expanded on by Crowley only a few years after accepting his role as a prophet in light of Liber L, so he was not at his wisest, such as when he wrote the Book of Thoth. Still, he left us with two contradictory accounts of the number 11, one being that it's the power of magic, the number of the power of magic itself, and the other explanation is that it is a Qliphothic cursed number for equaling 2, which is duality. But I would say, in this way 11 is thought evil, only by magic and seeking union, one ascends from there into the higher worlds. But now, in light of the Book of the Law, we glean, quote, every number is infinite, there is no difference, end quote. This gave Crowley a new idea of number to work with. In fact, discrimination of any kind is not of Nuit. All things happening simultaneously are of her. All are one thing. To quote Crowley's comment on Liber L, chapter 122, quote, Nuit is all that which exists and the condition of that existence. This question of making no difference, as ordained, is to regard the whole of the non-ego, or universe, apparently external to the self, as a single phenomena. Samadhi on any one thing becomes therefore samadhi on the whole. The mystic who availeth in this can then perform his great work of love under will in an operation instead of being obliged to unite himself with a non-ego piecemeal. This all of a sudden allows for one to play with things previously forbidden under the Abrahamic tyranny. For instance, the number 22 in Gematria reads, the number of letters in the Hebrew alphabet and of the paths of the tree. Hence suggests completion of imperfection, finality, and fatal finality. Note 2 times 11 equals 22, the accursed dyad at play with the shells. Further down, the number 44, Crowley writes, Hebrew letters DM, Dam, which translates to blood. Dam, blood. Here, 4 times 11 equals the corruption of the created world. Now, further down in part 2, Crowley also writes, the number 44 is useful to me chiefly because I had never examined it, and so had acquiesced in it as accursed. When it was brought by a messenger whose words proved true, I then understood it as an attack on the 4 by the 11. Without shedding of blood, 44, therefore, is no remission. Also, since the messenger could teach this and prophecy, it added credit to the adept who sent the message, end quote. Elsewhere in other books, Crowley later attributes the number 44 directly to Horus, the crowned and conquering child. So clearly we could see his concept of the number 11 definitely was shaped by Liber L. So let's dive into this. 11, by its shape, is in the appearance of the horns of the Sabbatic goat, Baphomet, the 8-letter god of all, Pan. In Liber L, chapter 1, verse 64, quote, "Nothing is a secret key of this law. 61 the Jews call it. I call it 880, 418, end quote. Recall earlier that the Empress and the Hierophant are Hadid, thus 11. Well, here is another piece to that puzzle connecting 11 with Nothing, the Kabbalistic 0. But before that, back to the horns of Baphomet quickly, for it is by these horns that the light is channeled through the wand of the magician. Now, if you look at the horns of the Sabbatic goat, they point up. They are literally receptors for the divine light to focus down and out through the wand of the magician, and by the appearance of the horns, they represent the number 11. As odd is magic force itself, magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. 11 is the means to attain union with God, or nature if you prefer, the highest will of the aspirant, that they may flow with the current, doing that which they need at any given moment without any karmic consequences, essentially to be one with the Tao. So in this way, 11 is both the highest and lowest, a glyph of all and not. It is light and it is night, and a means to that which is beyond them. I feel a lecture on the number 11 isn't complete without this next part to briefly analyze Abrahadabra. So this isn't a lecture on the word Abrahadabra. This is a lecture on the number 11. So I'm not going to break down all of the possible interpretations and things surrounding the word Abrahadabra. But in connection to the number 11, Abrahadabra has 11 letters, which is very important that we've established. 11 is the number of magic, right? And through all of the various means that I've already mentioned, but just on the word Abrahadabra, it equals 418. 418 is Cheth spelled in full. Cheth, by numerical Hebrew value, is 8. 8 is Mercury, the letter Beth. But 8 is also Atu 8, which used to be Leo, the 9th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Now, because of Zadi is not the star, Teth is now attributed to the 11th card, so it flips these two cards on one side of the zodiacal wheel to create a loop at the end, so that on the other end, Hey and Zadi are flipped, creating a loop. So you have two loops surrounding a circle on the zodiacal belt, if that makes sense. So adjustment is now the eighth card instead of the 11th, and Leo is the 11th card. So right there's something very interesting by playing around with these numbers. The word Abrahadabra connects to Atu 11, right? Through that number 8 being the value of Cheth. So again, Abrahadabra equals 418. 418 is Cheth spelled in full. Cheth is the 8th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, so it equals 8 by its own value. So 8 connects to 11 in that very cool way because of the tarot, the correspondences of the tarot in the magician's tables. So I just think that that's really cool, and it adds a little something extra to meditate on the number 11. In L, chapter 120, the key of the rituals is in the secret word which I have given unto him. And in Crowley's old comment, he writes on verse 20 of chapter 1, this word is perhaps Abrahadabra, the sacred word of 11 letters. Now, also in Liber L, Liber 31, the book of the law, Abrahadabra is used only 3 times. All in chapter 3. These are verses 1, 47, and 75. So it's the very first word that opens chapter 3. It's the word that closes chapter 3 in verse 75. And it's also in the midst. This barring the final closing after chapter 375, which states, the book of the law is written and concealed. Om Ha. So in researching the number 11 and putting together my notes for this talk, it led me to look at the word Abrahadabra at the closing of chapter 3. And then right at the end, there's 11 words that I'm going to talk about right now. So this lecture actually led me to do my own little analysis of a part of the Book of the Law. And while this doesn't really give you too much information about the number 11 in terms of Thelema and why it's important, I just think that it's a cool way that 11 has become a tool for me to interpret the Book of the Law for myself and to be able to share my findings. So I think that this is just a way that I'm demonstrating how you might use Gematria in a certain type of way for your own personal analysis of the Book of the Law, which I personally believe everybody should do if you're really studying and practicing Thelema. So let me get into that now. So it literally says Abrahadabra, the Book of the Law is written and concealed Om-Ha, right? So take a look at this image of the plate of that verse. I put a red triangle around it to indicate what I'm about to say. Note that these 3 lines consist of 11 words and 3 periods. To my mind, there is a symbolism here that goes unnoticed, as Crowley's commentaries on the law make no mention of this passage. Again, to me, only to me, the 3 lines appear to represent the 3 veils of the Ein Sof beyond Kether. They are in the form of a descending triangle, like that of the red triangle coined by the beast as the tongue of Horus. The 3 lines then play double in the following manner. Line 1 consists of 7 words, 7 is Venus, thus the feminine. The second line has 2 words to represent Hadith, the second sphere, Chachma, the paternal. And then line 3, again 2 words, but broken by 2 periods. These 2 words, with periods to break them, reinforces the idea of 2 separate things, such as in the formula of 0 equals 2. -1 plus +1 equals 2. In this third line, the word Om equals 47. In Hebrew, we get a wry or perverse person, a fool. We get foolish. We get Om, which translates to hubbub. And there's a note on that by Crowley from 777. Or actually, I got this on Bill Heydrich. The word hubbub, which is it's an expression of noise, tumult, or alarm. Now, me personally, I take this to mean or insinuate to awake or arise. Also, in yogic or Hindu philosophy is the sound of creation by God. Also on the number 47, we get to be dumb or mute, a small measurate or cubit, and a mighty warrior, to be clean, bright, or pure, turban, to be honored, renowned, to be a great or a chief, to be noble, excellency, and precious. Essentially, if we meditate on this group of words under 47, it appears to me to be indicating much of the higher aspirations of an aspirant, the state of being of one who has assimilated Liber L and Thelema into their being, an attitude to carry, and a levity as well. Now, in that third line, after Om is the word Ha, which equals 6, He Aleph, 6. 6 is simply the Vav, the nail used to crucify. 6 is also Sol, the solar consciousness, the heart, or supreme deity such as Ra and Horus. In Om Ha, past the surface statement of attack or completion, is concealed a confirmation of my notice in that Om, being 3 letters, 3 signifying Bina, is the sound of the Ein Sof or God creating the universe. This, to me, symbolizes Nuit, the negative aspect of existence, for Nuit is attributed to line 0, as well as Bina. So it's the feminine, Om. Ha, being 2 letters, represents to me Chachma in this. Ha is also laughter. Equaling 6, Ha is again solar and reinforces the father. So we have a mother and a father, or a positive and a negative, or negative and positive. And laughter is of utmost importance to Thelema, as it is written in Little Essays Towards Truth. So I'll just quote. The common defect of all mystical systems previous to that of the Aeon, whose law is Thelema, is that there has been no place for laughter. But the sadness of the mournful mother and the melancholy of the dying man are swept in the limbo of the past by the confident smile of the immortal child. And there is no vision more critical in the career of the adept of Horus than the universal joke. In this trance he accepts fully the formula of Osiris, and in the act transcends it. The spear of the centurion passes harmlessly through his heart, and the sword of the executioner strikes idly on his neck. Now, Almha together equals 53, and I've honestly never given 53 much notice before looking at this passage a couple days ago and doing some of this work around Abrahadabra, which led me to this. So 53 in Hebrew gives to announce or tell, to speak as moved by divine impulse or prophecy. It gives to glow steadily, to build, to be firm. It gives writhing, pain, strength. It gives trinket or ornament. It gives to bind or join, to hold and close, to be hot or glow, heat. It gives excitement, wine, anger, poison, warmth, the sun. Now, again, I've never really thought about the number 53, but in this context, it's interesting to say the least, and it appears to indicate illumination, right? Um, so lastly, in the 3 lines closing Liber L after chapter 375, they remind me of Od as the 3 deities of Liber L: Aleph, the mother and the father, right? The fool, which is Horpakrat or Horus, the child; Vav, the father, which is the Hierophant; and Daleth, which is Venus, feminine. The fact that they imply the concealing behind the Ein Sof also to me implied the law will create, such as the divine spark concealed behind Kether did or does by descending, thus the descending triangle. That and that Kether is in Malkuth, etc. Here on Abrahadabra, again, Abrahadabra equals 418 by its letters and its Gematria. 418 is Chet spelled in full. Chet also equals 8, it's the 8th letter. 8 is Mercury. Mercury equals Beth. You could see this as a footnote, I believe, or in Liber 58 itself. Thus, right, in this whole formula, we have the Magus as the bearer of the Holy Grail. 418, 8, and 11 all interplay, and by grappling with the ideas I've put down in this thesis, they are keys to attainment through the Book of the Law. In their own way, they all come down to Pan Phage, Pangenitor. So this is a very brief video. Just to recap, it's like 11 is basically a way to direct magic. It is also to realize, yes, the world of physical matter is what we're born into, ignorant children, and our job is to transcend that. And one of the means to do that is through Thelema. The other way is through any type of occultism or esoteric or yoga or anything that really gets you deep into the most deepest part of self that peels back the layers of reality. So the number 11, again, also by the horns of Baphomet, looks like the number 11. I don't like the idea personally of adding 2 numbers together, so 11 has 2 ones. 1 plus 1 equals 2. I think it's useful in some senses, but I don't know. I like when you could break down a number by its components. So for instance, 5 plus 6 or 8 plus 3 equals 11, and then you analyze the components that make up a number, especially when you get something like 5 and 6, which are very, very significant numerical symbols, right, that represent pentagrams and hexagrams, which are so heavily used in occultism. So yeah, there's a lot going on with the number 11. It is the means to wake up. It is the means to find and understand yourself. It is the means to commune with the Kabbalistic zero, to create, if you will. So that's been my piece on this, and love is the law, love under will. Cheers.